Okay, we're rolling.
I'll start the tape. Okay, this is a home interview, Bainbridge, New York, 16th of May 2006, approximately 1:10 p.m. Interviewers are Wayne Clarke and Mike Russert. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
My name is Stewart Marshall Brooks. I was born in Sidney, New York.
And when were you born, please?
April 6, 1923.
Okay. What was your educational background prior to entering service?
Well, I went from high school to college, and interestingly enough, I had a war scholarship to Hamilton College.
Now, what do you mean by a war scholarship?
Well, it was a competition in chemistry, and I won the first prize, and I was given this war scholarship. That was in 1942, and I was at Hamilton almost a semester, and my brother was, one of my older brothers was in the service, and I felt very uncomfortable being there, even though I said I had a war scholarship. And I enlisted in December 1942.
Okay, I'm going to go backward a second. Do you remember where you were when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Oh yes, very well. And I remember the declaration of war.
Tell me about
My mother had just gotten a Philco radio,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember it came from WGY, Schenectady, and I heard Roosevelt declaring war.
Do you remember your reaction when you heard about this?
Not,
Did you?
it didn't, strangely, it didn't seem to make, well, I was a junior in high school, and I must say, it didn't have all that much of a ring to it at the time.
Okay.
Although I'm sure that it registered like with a lot of people, but I didn't think an awful lot about it. I think until the next year when I think it was something like sinking in.
Okay. Now you said you enlisted. You enlisted in the Army.
Yes.
Why did you select the Army?
Through my brother. He was an officer in the Signal Corps, and he said, I think you do quite well with one. He said, I think that'd be a good place to go in. And I enlisted in the Signal Corps. By the way, you could select your service, but if you were drafted, you couldn't. So I thought that was another good idea to do that.
Okay. Where did you go for your basic training?
I was sworn in Binghamton, New York, at the post office. And we took a train from Binghamton to Buffalo. At the Buffalo station, this is cold weather, December, we scrambled up on these trucks, and we were taken to Fort Niagara, which was the induction center. And Fort Niagara, the way I understand it, is the oldest fort in the United States. Matter of fact, it started out as a British fort, or excuse me, a French fort, then a British fort, and then it was an induction center for a large part of the Northeast. And we were there maybe 3 weeks. But that was induction, and we went from Fort Niagara by train to, of all places, Atlantic City, New Jersey. At that time, the Army had taken over all the hotels along the boardwalk. And some of these were quite elaborate. The hotel, the fellows, the group that I came from Fort Niagara, we went into the hotel called Colton Manor, which is off the boardwalk. And all the basic training, or as far as, excuse me, the marching and all that sort of thing was done out behind, away from the boardwalk. But a lot of it was done in a place called Haddon Hall, in Convention Hall, along the boardwalk. We used to march on the boardwalk. So we had most of our basic training there.
Okay. How long were you there?
I would say we were there, about a month. And then, I must throw in here, there was quite a lot of testing. And I did quite well. And 3 or 4 of us were selected to go to a civilian electronics school in Kansas City. And I remember the name of it was Midland Radio and Television School. And at that time, when you talk about 60-some years ago, radio was in quotes, a high-tech type of thing. Every town had their own radio repair, and it was something to go into. But this was a civilian school, and we were there 2 months. That was the course.
How many military men were there?
There were different classes. Matter of fact, the classes were held in the Power and Light building, which is still in Kansas City. Same building that Harry Truman had an office in. And this was up on the 5th or 6th floor of the school. And there were many different classes that you could be in. The class I was in probably had about 150 in it. And the scuttlebutt was that if you flunked out, it was quite rigorous. You started out and you had to know your math, you know, that sort of thing. And if you flunked out, the idea was that you would end up in the infantry. And we used to laugh at it. We used to laugh at that. But I guess there may have been something to it. After graduation, we took another battery of tests. And once again, I was lucky enough to be selected to another school. This one was at Camp Murphy, Florida, which is about...
No, excuse me a second. When you were at the school in Kansas City, did you have to wear your uniforms? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
And once again, we stayed in a hotel, very nice hotel, real close to the school. This was downtown Kansas City. And it was a really nice situation. And after graduation, I was selected with about a half a dozen of us. We went by, everything was by train. Always the curtains were pulled down. You never knew where you were going until you got there. This, at the time, was, it was kind of a secret type of operation, really. Everything was confidential. And this Camp Murphy was right in the dunes, so to speak, quite close to the ocean, about 25 miles north of West Palm Beach. And we were there for about 2 months. And now you're talking in the year 1943. And this was radar school. And it was a hush-hush word. And there were several types of radar used in the Army. And the radar that our group was trained on was called LW radar, which stood for lightweight. It was the smallest radar. And the idea was to be able to put this radar together, and you had to put it together in the dark. It was all in boxes, and you ended up with this contraption, which, by the way, I understand cost around $25,000, which was quite a lot of money. And it was housed in a tent, and each section had their own radar. There were 12 in a section, and one of the, in a maneuver, this later on, when we left from, when we finished school at Camp Murphy, we went to the other, across the state to near Fort Myers, and we used to get down near the Everglades at night, and in the dark, put this thing together. and
Well,
the antenna came right up through the tent.
Now, when you say lightweight, how large was the?
Oh, it was
unit?
in the vicinity of a ton or so.
Oh,
It was the
okay.
smallest
Mhm.
radar.
Mhm.
To give you an idea, some of the radars in the Army weighed up like 60 ton.
Mhm.
And this LW radar was designed for the Pacific. That's the idea was. And it was designed for the Pacific because when they took over an island, you could set this thing up within hours for what they call early warning. And you used that until you got the larger radars that would complement. It was actually what they call early warning too. It was the first type of warning that you could give by picking up enemy aircraft. And from Florida, it was in the fall. Again, you never knew where you were going. And we got on the train, and lo and behold, we looked out after a while, and we were outside of Taunton, Massachusetts, which was Camp Miles Standish. It was a port of embarkation. And of course, by that time, everybody knew that what was going to happen, that you were leaving from Boston. And when you went from Boston, you were going to Europe. And we were at Camp Miles Standish for a little over a month. And from Camp Miles Standish, Taunton, Mass, we took another train to Boston and got on a ship called the Empress of Australia, which was a British ship. And I think it took about 2 weeks to do the Atlantic, and we ended up at the Firth of Clyde.
Were you in a convoy or a single ship?
It was a convoy. And we ended up at Glasgow, Firth of Clyde, New Year's Day, 44. And from Glasgow, I think it was the same day we got off the ship. We took a train to a place in England called Henley-on-Thames, which is quite a well-known place, really. And there, I went to another school. This was the Royal Corps of Signals. We'd been transferred to the Royal Corps of Signals, British outfit. And we were once again trained on the LW radar. And I must throw in here that the LW radar was of British design. Matter of fact, the LW radar was manufactured in England. And we would go on maneuvers. And we went to various places in England. And we had a fair amount of basic training, much more extensive than we have in the States, even to the point of throwing grenades. And we thought, my gosh, we're not in the infantry. But they thought we should say we should be equipped to that.
Up to this point, then, you had received no training with weapons.
Yeah,
at all?
yes, I take
you
that.
had?
Yes,
Okay.
I must go back to Florida. We had quite a lot of training in Florida after I left the radar school there. Yes.
Okay.
Matter of fact, machine guns and Browning automatic rifles. That, I would say, pretty much like infantry training in a way. Obstacle course. We also had more of this in England, but there we had quite a lot of dealing with, as I say, hand grenades and pistols and all that sort of thing. And we went around the English coast a lot and set up the radar and tested it out. We didn't know exactly what was cooking. And I don't think the idea about the invasion was, I wasn't too much aware of it right away until
Now
later.
you had, everyone that you were working with there then was English, so the officers and the instructors.
Well, there were 12 of us,
Mhm.
and Americans. And then there were other sections that went with other British outfits.
Mhm. How did you get along with the British?
Very well. Very well. And once again, we had quite a lot of technical training there. And when you were at that time, depending on the company you were with, determined which type of radar you were going to be in, that you were going to operate. Say some of the companies had large radars. This LW radar was the company that I was with. I might add to this, I was in what they call the 555 Signal Aircraft Warning Battalion. This company was under that, but as I say, all of it was attached to the Royal Corps of Signals. But I was in the 555 Signal Aircraft Warning Battalion. Sometimes it's called SAW Battalion. A battalion, I would say, had about 1,000 in it, and there were all these various companies. The different companies would specialize in the type of, one would have a intermediate type of radar, one would have a more sophisticated type of radar.
So basically then, when you were with the British, you never, excuse me, your whole unit was never together, you were just divided up into like
for example,
small-
I think a company, the company I was with under the 555, I was company A, say. They changed around a lot, but I was always with the 555 Signal Aircraft Warning Battalion,
Okay.
and we would be attached to this Royal Corps of Signals, and another company maybe they'd be with the Royal Corps of Signals too, but in a different location.
Now, what kind of weapons did you carry? Did you carry American weapons or British weapons?
I had a very interesting question. I had a Springfield rifle. I picked it up in Florida. That was my issue.
An old 03?
It was an 03. And we were issued that. And I fired that a lot on the range. And I remember this was a corporal training. He says, you know, you're quite good at the 03 rifle. I don't even own a gun today, but it's a beautiful rifle. And it's a collector's item. But we were issued that. That was the issue. Whereas, you know, later on you were given a Garand or an M1 and all that sort of thing.
So most of your training...
I kept that all through the war.
Then what happened to it?
The 03.
Did you?
I was always, look at that. And speaking of other things you fire, I remember in Florida firing a Thompson submachine gun, 45 and all that. But I kept this rifle. I always had the rifle.
Okay. How long was your training with the British?
January, February, March, April. I'd say 4 months. And then the battalion came together and we went to Wales around May. About May we went to Wales in the vicinity of Cardiff. And it turned out that Cardiff would be the port of embarkation for D-Day. I would say we were in Cardiff, maybe a good month in that vicinity, because we were there in May, D-Day, June 6th. And I would say we were within 20 miles of Cardiff, which is on the Bristol Channel.
Right.
We were there probably for maybe at least 3 or 4 weeks, something like that.
Did you have much contact with the British people?
Oh yes, oh boy, yes, lots of contact. Wherever I was always with the people. Oh yeah. When we were in Henley and Oxford, as I said, we were around in England a lot, different towns, and we'd go to London. And my first brush with warfare or war, was in Hyde Park, and this fellow and I were going through, we'd get him out of a pub, we were in Hyde Park. But ACAC guns are all over the place, and it was around maybe 1 o'clock. It was after midnight. And all at once the sky started to light up. It got lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter. And what they did first was drop incendiary bombs and flares so that they could see the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And after this lighting mechanism, then you begin to hear the roar of the bombers, and they were bombing something, not every night, but you could depend on it. And I always remember I was really scared. And this woman came up to me. She says, "Don't you get used to it." Yeah, this was in Hyde Park, and I was always with a British a lot. I had a lot of friends there.
Now, when you were with the Royal Corps of Signals, did you eat British food or the American food, or
British?
What was their food like?
I liked it. One of my favorites. I'm not saying the Army had fish and chips, but if you didn't like it, you could get on the street and get some. And the pub food was wonderful, but the Army food is okay. Yeah?
Okay. Tell us about your preparations for D-Day then.
I would say that I would concentrate mainly in May in Wales, and one of the main things there was waterproofing of the vehicles. And by that time, the LW, this which we had trained on as being in a tent, where you put it together in a tent outfit. In other words, you take it in a tent, or in a truck, and then assemble it. By that time, we had a Ford van they had brought in, Ford vans for the LWs, and all the equipment was placed in this van, and the antenna came right up through the roof of the van. Now I have a picture of that. I don't know if you'd like to see that.
Yes. Yeah.
I have this is my show and tell.
Yes.
Here is...
If you hold it like this, Wayne can focus in on it.
This is a... excuse me. This is a British van. The van that we had was very similar, except this wasn't the one I had. But notice the antenna.
Oh, yes.
And that's known as a Yagi. Does that ring a bell? Y-A-G-I. It was of Japanese design. And it looks like pretty much something you put in your backyard to put your clothes on. And this was collapsible. You wouldn't have the antenna on and so forth. The antenna would be taken down, put on the top. But all of the electronics was in the van. And as I say, this is what they call the British lorry. But ours was a Ford van. And this is what we went in on D-Day.
Now, how did you waterproof them?
I had no. I really didn't have anything to do with water. There were, by the way, each one of these LWs had what you call a section. There were 12. I was a sergeant, and I was the head of the maintenance. Of the 12 of us, there'd be a guard.
You can put the photograph.
There'd be a guard. There'd be someone for the engine to supply the power. There'd be a cook. There'd be somebody that would look for this and that. And
now, how many of these LW units were there?
There were several. There was Company A and B that had these units, and I say one of the main things of getting ready on preparation was waterproofing the vehicles, making sure you have all your equipment that you're going to personally take in. And I could get on a list of all the stuff that you would take on your body.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one thing always stuck out was a package of sulfadiazine. And gas mask, life preserver, when you blow up water.
Mm-hmm.
That, you make darn sure that you had all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Maps. And just about a week before the invasion, we were told where we were going. And I hope we're not getting ahead of the story too much, but and I'll answer, I think, with your question about how many LWs there were.
Mm-hmm.
But as the 555, the battalion I was with, the idea was that I think all of the battalion was supposed to have been landed on D-Day, which is a fair amount of equipment. As it turned out, this is a funny one, as it turned out, only 50 of the 1,000 went in on D-Day, actually on the beach. The others were out in the ships. I was among the 50. And there were 2 LWs that went out on the beach. The one I was with and one other. And that landed on the beach. There were 2 LWs. That was the only, as far as I know, that was the only radars that were in D-Day, other than a British LW. Oh, well, this was British, but Royal Air Force. I did not know that until a year ago. I did not know that where we went on Omaha Beach, I did not know that there was a Royal Air Force attachment. And I think they had something like 100 and some that came in, and this is the interesting part, they came in on Omaha, which was not a British beach. And I think the reason they came in there was for some type of support. As I say, I did not know it at the time. Very interesting too, of this 140 or 50 that came in, British, they got in a traffic jam on the beach. And they couldn't get off what they call the sortie or exit from the beach. It was kind of really a traffic jam. This was in the afternoon, around 4 o'clock of D-Day. And they were trapped, and I think they lost something like 40 men. Which is rather interesting because the outfit I wasn't a casualty. I know of no casualties of the 50 that I went in with.
Now, what kind of craft did you go in?
We went in on landing, probably a LST, landing ship tank, which is kind of misleading because you could put all kinds of things on it. And then you went off, then off the beach. Well, maybe to go back, the invasions going onto the beach started at 6:30 in the morning. That's when the 1st Division went in, the 29th Division. There was Utah Beach. The American beaches were the Utah, Omaha. We went in Omaha. And the 1st Division and the 29th went in there. It started at 6:30. We went in on Omaha at about, I would say, around 4 p.m. or 1600 hours Army time. And it was in that section where we went in that the British were all, the 100 and some of them, I did not know it at the time, but they had this high casualty. And as I say, 2 LWs went in, and the rest of the FF, or the 555 battalion, were still out in the water. And as far as the actual mechanics of getting in, I was on the LWs were on one ship, but the men were on another ship. I think I was on what they call an LCI. The men were on landing craft infantry. And this is quite large, and we went over the side on ropes, and we got into landing craft. And I think the landing craft I went in was an LCVP, which stands for Landing Craft Vehicle Personnel. We went in, but that's a little fuzzy in my head, because I think the other another type of craft took the radars. As I say, to get back to the 12 people that run this thing, you always had a truck driver. So I think there was, the trucks came in one way, but as far as myself, we were on this LCI. We got off, going down the ladder, onto a smaller landing craft. It probably was a LCVP. They call it a Higgins boat.
Yes.
But there were others too, smaller. There was one called Landing Craft Assault. And when we got off the LCI into this LCVP, I would say we were about a mile out in the water. And then we came in, and you could see these ropes had been thrown down. And we got off in water about up to our neck. And you've got to grab the ropes and pull yourself in. And I have pictures of did you want to see another picture of the beach? The beach, the Omaha and all of them were, but they had Rommel's asparagus.
Oh yes, okay.
What Rommel's asparagus was were log posts. They had log posts, and they had log ramps, and they also had hedgehogs, which were pieces of steel, 3 pieces. So, and they were in rows. They had these hedgehogs made out of steel, log ramps, log posts coming up. And some of these, by the time in the afternoon, some of this was underwater, because they wanted the infantry to go in early. They were at low tide. The water was starting to come up. Main thing is the mines. On the top of the log posts and the log ramps were German mines. And you knew it because they told you that. There was a sign, Achtung, meaning, watch out for the mines. That was to warn them. And then, in addition to that, when you get up on what they call up on the beach proper, there was actually a road that went along through there. There was this concertina wire, and you really didn't know what you were going to walk on. Anyway, here's the maybe I'll show it to you later. I'll show you that later about the posts. And
now, were you under fire as your crafts came
yes,
in?
we are. The main, other than stepping on a mine or whatever, it would be, as I say, we went in around 4 o'clock.
Yes.
You had Private Ryan and his crew going in. The movie, they went around 6:30, something like that. And I would liken going in at around 4, as I've been thinking about it. It would be about like encountering a gigantic traffic accident and coming on like on the tail end of it. But at that time there were still mortars, machine gun, but strangely enough, something a lot of people don't make much of is artillery. They call it were 88s. These 88s were hitting the water, and they hit a landing craft next to ours. And I think everybody on that one, I didn't realize at the time, probably everybody was killed on that one. But the radars made it in on the beach. But going back to what they had in mind, the whole battalion was supposed to have been about 5 miles inland from the beach on D-Day. And D-Day, even at night, we were still on the road along the cliff, or the cliffs. Mm-hmm. These cliffs, filets in French, the cliffs, they run from 100 to 170 feet. So you're coming out of the water, and maybe 600 feet of sand, something like that. And then the cliffs went along the Omaha beach, 100 to 170 feet. Length of Omaha is a little less than 4 miles. And then you had these openings off the beach. And of course you're not going to use the openings, because these openings were, the Germans had like 13 major bunkers. And even so, we were supposed to, again, that was the plan, the whole battalion about 5 miles in from the beach on D-Day, and as it happened, there were only 50 of us there in the evening. And I probably 3 or 4 days later before we got in where we should have been in the first place. And that night, we made it up on the top of went up through the one of the exits, the sortie. And characteristic of Normandy are the hedgerows. The French call it bocage. Go to when you go there now, you're not going to see that. My wife and I have been over several times. Bocage, no hedgerows, they're gone. But at that, they were there then, and it was a death trap because you never knew exactly what the deal was. So that night we spent in the trench with, I don't know, they were dead, but Germans and GIs and wherever. And well, the main thing, we got the radars.
Now, did you ever unfold the antennas?
We were on, and so
on that day?
The next day, we had that, what I showed you, in operation, and we were picking up planes. There weren't many planes, by the way, come to think of it. They were the Luftwaffe had been pretty much taken care of. And we had that going, and I don't know, they were split up. I don't know where the other LW was at that time, some distance from us. As a matter of fact, there were 4 officers, and they ended up in one of these sorties coming off the beach, and we got separated. But anyway, there were 2 on, and I don't know about the other one the next day, but ours was in operation.
Now, what was the range of one of these?
The LW could pick up, you could go to 200 miles. 200 miles of that. And yeah, you could do around 200 miles of that. But anyway, we were picking up, we were in operation. And as I've told my wife many times, I think about being scared and all that stuff, I think what worried me, may sound strange, as I said, I wasn't in the infantry, I don't know about that. But personally, I was so concerned that that thing would work. I think I was more frightened in a way that the thing wouldn't operate than of anything else. And also on the beach proper, maybe I mentioned it in the thing I filled out. I don't know if you're familiar with this or not, but what they call out-of-body experience. Did you ever run in?
I've heard of it.
Yeah. Well, I didn't encounter that until I do so much reading. Maybe this year. I'd never really run into that. I think it was in Discover magazine, big article on out-of-body experience. It's kind of hard to explain it. Roughly, it's where you're here, and part of you
Can see
leaves
you
and it's
there.
over there and
Yeah.
watches what you're...
Yeah.
That's as close, that does it for me. When anybody ever asks me, because I've been asked this before, how do you, what was it like? What did you feel? I could never really answer it, but that's a good one. That lets me off the hook. Because going up that beach, as I say, it's around 3 miles long, and no matter where you looked, it was just a mass of death and burned up hardware and a lot of barrage balloons. That was interesting, and some of them are on fire. A lot of fire going on. A lot of buildings on fire. Matter of fact, other than there's a fair amount of gunfire and noise that way, but lots of smoke. And I must point out that it wasn't too bad a day. I think the sun was out. Very interesting, because they were deciding, they didn't know exactly which day to go in on D-Day. They didn't know which day because of the weather. They didn't, and June, the weather had been bad, and they predicted bad weather. Bad on the 4th, June 4th, bad on the 5th. And the intellectual hero of D-Day is probably the meteorologist that said, you have an opening. Because Eisenhower pinned him down. Are you sure? He said, I think it'd be an opening in the weather. But I recall this. I think the sun was out. I have another picture. The reason I kind of like this one, it isn't too dramatic, but I got this from a radar museum in England. You can see the trucks on it.
Oh yes, okay.
This doesn't look too spectacular, but actually it's kind of unique. And you can see the Aunt Rommel's asparagus. You can see the ramps, or the log ramps, and you can see the trucks. I was all smashed. I think some of these are all American trucks. And you can also see a landing craft. Where we came in was roughly, looked pretty much like that. And I might point out that in Omaha, as I said, was slightly less than 4 miles long, and it was divided up into sectors. According to Alpha, like Greek. Abel, Baker, Charlie, Dog, Easy, Box. And you were told that you would be going in Able, Easy, or whatever. And then each of those in turn was divided up into red and green. And it didn't turn out exactly where we were, but we came out at a place called, on the beach, Easy Red, which was near the closest beach town would be Saint Laurent. Anyway, we were on the air, reporting aircraft. After we were in Normandy maybe a month until there was a breakout at St. Lo, and we went south and worked our way toward Paris. And once Paris was taken, we used to win on pass. And by the way, all this time we were setting up a radar reporting planes. By that time, this LW was working along with larger radars as backup. And then in the summer, we worked our way through France and into Belgium. And in the fall, this would be 44 we're talking about. In the fall of 44, we were near a city called Verviers, which is about 5 or 6 miles from the German border. Specifically, we were at a place called, what was the name of that? Elsenborn. Which was, you look over, you're at Elsenborn, you look that way and you say, oh, there's Germany over there, like a mile away. But the nearest city was Verviers. And the very largest city nearby was Liège. And that's very important from what I'm about to tell you. We were 30 miles from Liège, which is the second largest city in Belgium. It was near the German border. We set up our radar there at of all places, a former German airport. It was a German airport. And we set up our radar there. And our mission was to report planes coming in with our larger radars for cover up, for backup. And then I would say we set this up near the German border in maybe October 44. October, November, and then December 16th, lo and behold, the Battle of the Bulge. There you go, once again, I wasn't in the infantry, but we were there, and you had quite a panoramic view with the radar, and we were just on the skirt of where the Bulge came through, and not too far from, to give you an idea, I would say we were about 10 miles from Normandy, the Normandy massacre. But that's where the Bulge started. And the edge of it was close to us. But about that time, we moved. When that happened, we had to move back to another location.
Tell about the
And by the way, when the Bulge came, well, I must say this, when the Bulge came through, 2 or 3 of the radars were taken prisoner. And I didn't know about that at the time either. But we got out, and we went to another location, and...
Now, if a unit, they lost the radar units themselves, were they supposed to destroy them or something if they knew they were going to...
But I didn't know about that until later on. Yeah, but they were captured. Yes. Yeah, sure. It was. You had a deal where you had explosives to blow it up, and we moved to another location, not far away. And when no sooner had we gone to this other location, which once again was about 30 miles from Liège. The radar operator, once we had it set up, the radar operator came in and he said, I think there's something wrong with the radar set. It was interesting. The only one that knew the technical stuff was myself. He had a radar operator, but that's what they were. They operated the thing. And he said, look at the screen. The screen on our radar was about 6 inches long. about that wide. And there, that was your that was your scope, and then your miles would spread across, and a plane would appear as a pip. That's what we call them, a pip. And you could follow, see how fast the plane was going by how fast it moved along the baseline. And he said, I think something wrong with the set. I said, why? He said, well, look at that pip. So I looked at it and I said, well, I guess you're right. Meaning that it was going too fast. The pip was moving too fast. Because ordinarily they didn't move that fast. And no sooner had I opened up the special box where we had the circuits and all that, hoping that I would find the right tool. No sooner had I done that, the ground started to shake. And overhead went this ungodly thing. It looked like a glider with a blowtorch. And it was my first I didn't know. I'd never heard of it. First contact with a buzz bomb. They were being launched not far away, and they were headed to Liège. And then the next day, they were sending we used to pick up about 1 an hour. And one day somebody clocked that they were sending over 300 a day of these buzz bombs. They were headed for Liège. And I can tell you a little bit more about would you like to have me say something about the buzz bomb?
Yeah.
They were landing in Liège. The buzz bomb, well, the Germans call them V1. That ring a bell?
Yes.
The V stood for Vergeltungswaffe. The retaliation weapon. That's what Hitler called it. The V comes from, in German, the V is a F. Vergeltungswaffe. And then there one, because later on there was a 2. It would be Vergeltungswaffe 1, and there was Vergeltungswaffe 2. This V1, Hitler named it. It had about it was 25 feet long, roughly, 17 feet wingspan. Weighed about 2 ton. Half of that was a warhead. The bomb was up in the front, and it has acetylene fuel, compressed air, quite sophisticated for the time, and it had a range of about 160 miles. And you could arrange this in such a way that you could say, well, I want this thing to go 100 miles, 50 miles. So they had this zeroed in such a way that they were landing in Liège. It was purely a terror weapon. And we were able to pick these up on the radar. And we were hooked into the alarm system in Liège, and we could afford about a 3-minute warning. And the bulk of this happened in January. And later on, when I came home out of the service, our outfit was given a special citation from the mayor of Liège, because it's unbelievable, but no civilians were killed. There was enough warning. This 3 minutes was enough to get on to the shelter. And the buzz bomb, sometimes the English call them doodlebug. The French call them robot. But they had very little penetration. It was mostly exploded that way. So if you were in the shelter, you could do it. Here's here's a diagram of a buzz bomb. That come out pretty well?
Yeah. I got the outline of it. It's kind of faded, but it's all right.
This is the body.
Yep.
Here's the wing. Here's the jet part, the jet engine part.
Okay.
Just as soon as that fuel ran out, See, it had an odometer on it. They could adjust it, how much mileage they want.
Yeah.
But they could go 160 miles, but they didn't have to go 160 miles because I would say we were 30 miles from Liège, and we picked them up, so they weren't that far away. But when they made this ungodly sound, and when that sound stopped, within about 2 seconds, it went straight down and exploded. And here, wife and I were together when I took this picture. It's the tail end of a buzz bomb, and this is the jet part. This was in the War Museum in London.
Okay. Got it.
And here is a map, not a map, but, well, it is in a way, given to me by a friend who has a museum in War Museum in Belgium, and it's the center of Liège, the city, and the black dots that you see are where these buzz bombs hit. They had a record of where they were hitting. This would be the center of the city, and these black dots are the it gives you an idea how many bombs we're sending, or how many of these buzz bombs there were.
Okay.
Matter of fact, there was a city that adjoins Liège called Seraing, and this fellow and I were in a pass one day in Seraing, and when we were there, we witnessed one of these buzz bombs. It was right overhead, and when that motor stopped, 2 seconds, that was what's interesting about it. In 2 seconds, you could take out a block with one of them. And by the way, they were first used in June '44 in England. They were sending more to London. So they had been around a while. They started using them in June, and my encounter was in the coming January, first time. See, I was after the Bulge, war was over. By the way, I remember May 8th, isn't that right? May 8th, 45, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
45.
Truman's birthday.
Truman's birthday. And we had this radar. By the way, we used to have it on all over the place. And this was in a farmer's backyard. And I remember with all of our equipment, we had radio and all that sort of thing. And the fellow that told me the war was over was the hired man on the farm. And I was in the kitchen, you might say with the farmer's daughter, but everybody was in the kitchen, and our radar was out there. And this hired man came in, he says, "Das Krieg kaputt." And that's how I found about the war being over. And when the war was over, by that time, you accumulated points to come home, and you can imagine how many points I had. I've been there.
You never had any leave time at all?
Oh yeah.
Or just some?
Oh, I didn't. Oh yes. And we, as I say, we were pretty much on our own. We're only one unit, 12. We were all split up, and we were all over Germany. And after Belgium, we went into Germany, and we were in different places. And by that time, I could come home. Quite a few points. Matter of fact, a maximum points. And the major of the outfit of the 555 called me in, and he said, "Would you be interested in staying in Germany a couple of more months, or 2 or 3 months more?" He says, "Because we have a kind of an interesting project, you might be interested in it."
Okay, I'm going to stop you right here.